Oh, watching an isekai? I'll show you something interesting. The two types of isekai are The Chronicles of Narnia and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. All isekai falls into these two categories. ReZero, Narnia. Konosuba, Yankee. I'm in love with the villainess, Yankee. The magical revolution of the reincarnated princess and the genius young lady, Narnia. Despite bringing a medieval society to modern technology, Ascendance of a Bookworm is Narnia.
Isekai, a genre of anime that I'm frankly sick of. I've never really liked Isekai, but things have gotten rather out of hand. Especially because the concept of waking up in another world and having to figure out where you are and try to survive makes for a very interesting base that you can do almost anything with. They could wake up in a crazy sci-fi dystopia on another planet, or in some strange, illogical, supernatural plane of existence that's full of horrors. But no, high fantasy, with video game logic and RPG elements sometimes, I guess. Why? Why this? Why all the time? Oh yeah, because Sword Art did it. You know, another thing that I fucking hate. But at least in Sword Art, being in a fantasy world with RPG logic makes sense because they were literally trapped in a VR fantasy RPG. But what would happen if you were to end up being reincarnated isekai style, but things were to go horribly wrong? Sachiko Uguisu, a person who exists. And if that description sounds lame, well, that's pretty much all of the information that I can find on them, so you know as much as me now. Sometimes going by Sachiko Hiyadori, they're a horror mangaka who specializes in writing horror manga one-shots, much like Junji Ito. As far as I can find, it looks like that they don't have anything that has been officially published in English. His blog is pretty much empty, and his Twitter is, well, Twitter has apparently gotten even worse since I've left the platform, and is borderline useless now, making trying to navigate Uguisu's page impossible. You know, since apparently posts are now not in chronological order, they are in a seemingly random order with posts being shown years apart, but the most I could put together is that in 2020, he released a new manga series, and then volume 2 came out in February of 21, and then a few weeks later, he made a post asking his followers to spread the word on the series to anyone who might be interested, because the volumes had made hardly any sales. And I am saying he because though Sachiko is a female given name, I actually don't know anything about their identity because, again, I could find hardly anything about him. But what little I did find always referred to him as male, so that's just what I'm going with for now. Uguisu's horror is interesting. There can be quite a bit of gore, and it can become a little over the top and kind of ridiculous at some point. I mean, it's not Kago levels of absolute fucking lunacy, but Uguisu, you can expect to see someone's inside bits at some point being cut in half, or eaten by a monster, or something else. Though not always. Like Junji Ito, Sachiko Uguisu also has a 4-page one-shot horror manga that kinda sucks, and that one has no violence at all. It's mostly just a lady sitting at a table.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
He also wrote one of the stories in the Madoka Magica 10th Anniversary Anthology manga, which I actually really loved. Madoka is my favorite anime of all time, and I loved Uguisu's take on it. I will probably talk about both of these at some point, but I'm not gonna really get into much detail on either of them today. His most popular works are Beyond the Bad Dream, a horror anthology volume, as well as You Will Hear the Voices of the Dead. His Goodread page exists. A lot of 3s and 3.5s, which is not shocking. His stuff isn't bad, but sometimes leaves a little more to be desired. Unremarkable might be the best description, as I have enjoyed my time going through what stories I could find of his and think many of them are good, but nothing has really blown my mind. Though he does have some pretty creative ideas from time to time. But Lily, what about the isekai? What about the awkward turbo virgin being transported to a new world where everyone thinks he's awesome and wants to suck his dick, without him actually doing anything that would make anyone like him? Where's my trash? From Another World. That's not even a translation, its name is just in English for whatever reason. Tanaka Takeshi is isekai'd and leaves his common sense behind. Okay. Uguisu's take on isekai, From Another World, is a 29-page horror manga one-shot that tries to turn the isekai genre on its head. Tries, we'll get to that. Again, I was hard-pressed to find information on anything around Uguisu, so I couldn't tell you what magazine or volume this would have been published in or any background around it. But that's fine, I guess, because I don't really plan to get too deep into that stuff anyway. So with that, let's talk about the plot. And very quickly, if you find yourself enjoying my yapping, I would appreciate a like on the video, and if you really enjoyed it, then don't forget to subscribe. I plan on talking about many more horror manga one-shots like this in the future, as well as the narratives of other kinds of media. I also have memberships where for $1 you'll get a little extra video along with each upload. Okay, thanks for listening to my shameless shilling. Let's talk about the plot. Okay, so I'm going to try my best to go through the whole plot in its entirety, and then I'll circle back around for my comments. Okay, what happens in this? So the opening panel presents us with a naked man introducing himself as Tanaka Takeshi and explaining that he's unemployed. We then see that he is surrounded by many cloaked and hooded figures as he questions where he is. We then get the cover page with the tagline, "I, the unemployed NEET, will save the world?" We see Takeshi sitting naked in the middle of a barren wasteland, and the people surrounding him are shown to be these turtle people. They don't have shells, but they're supposed to be reptiles, and their faces honestly look kind of like the face of the stupid fucking pet tortoise that I have in my backyard. So fuck it, I'll be referring to them as turtles, though they are mostly meant to just be generic reptiles. One of the turtle people gets into Takeshi's face, and then announces that the hero has truly appeared to the cheers of those around them. One of the creatures tells Takeshi that he is a hero sent to save their world. Takeshi then remarks that this must be a dream since he was just home with his family. As we turn the page, we see Takeshi lying in a pool of blood, we see two people who have been killed laying on the couch, their bodies mutilated, and the next panel shows us that this is a home invasion, and two men have killed Takeshi and his family. One of them notices that Takeshi is still alive and hits Takeshi on the head with his hammer. The next panel, Takeshi seems to have suddenly come to, as if he had just been zoned out for a while. Takeshi takes some time to try and remember what exactly it was that he was doing with his family before waking up in the new world. As he's contemplating, the Wizard Turtle Man yells at him not to zone out as he is in the presence of the king and princess. The king remarks that it might be difficult to trust Takeshi to save the world if he keeps acting so unfocused. And at the mention of saving the world, Takeshi asks how they expect him to fucking do that in the first place. The Wizard Turtle explains that their country has been under attack from an enemy tribe, and they plan to use Takeshi's strength to scatter them. Takeshi remarks that what they're saying is, understandably, insane, and he explains that he has no magic or great strength, and he's just a normal guy who is, and excuse the slur, unemployed.
Worker, you job haver, so you have a job, don't you? Employee, college student, shower taker. What are you, employed?
The king and princess are, however, absolutely fucking ecstatic that their great hero is just some unemployed jerk-off, as what he is saying is exactly what the prophecy foretold. The wizard agrees, and I guess Takeshi is just too awkward to tell them otherwise, so he just goes with it, joining everyone in an evening feast. Takeshi questions whether or not this is actually a dream, but puts those thoughts aside as he decides to just eat since the food is so good. The princess refills his drink and gives him a wink, with our professional gooner thinking to himself about how these turtle people can sometimes be kind of cute. Sitting beside him, the princess definitely gives Takeshi a look, and Takeshi, likely for the first time in his life, if we're going by isekai tropes, realizes that he's actually pretty popular. We then cut back to Takeshi laying on the floor of his house, tied up and bleeding. The two home invaders find a girl who was hiding and drag her out, demanding to know if she called the cops. She says no, that she didn't, but the two men show no mercy, stabbing the girl in the eye while Takeshi can do nothing but lay there and watch. Someone remarks that Takeshi seems to fade away at times, asking if it's some sort of side effect. And then in the next panel, we see that Takeshi fucked the turtle. The princess suggests that something extraordinary must have happened in Takeshi's former world, and that his fading in and out is him returning to that world momentarily. Takeshi then suggests that no, he actually fully lives over in his own world and only goes to the other world whenever he falls asleep. The princess then reminds Takeshi that tomorrow is the big battle that he's supposedly going to win, and Takeshi suddenly has a boost of confidence and decides to just march on into battle as everyone keeps telling him he should. I guess that's just what turtle pussy does to a motherfucker. Takeshi then asks if he could get some type of ultimate weapon, or maybe, you know, literally anything at all to fight in this battle. The wizard assures Takeshi of his safety, but Takeshi would still like at least something, be it magic or even just a fucking gun from the actual regular real world. One of the knights gets sick of Takeshi's bitching and just fucking grabs him and starts dragging him up the hill. At the top of this hill, Takeshi sees some sort of structure that seems to look like some kind of door. Takeshi then steps into a mangled corpse. After realizing what he stepped in, he looks around to piles of bodies stuck with arrows and spears. Takeshi, seemingly forgetting what happens during a war, seems to get sick, remarking that it looks like a genocide. One of the knights tells him that he doesn't have to worry about fighting as the vanguard has already killed all the enemy soldiers. Takeshi, understandably confused, asks what the fuck he's actually supposed to be doing then, and then they all just sort of stare at him. We then get a closer view of this door, and the wizard begins to recite the words of the prophecy, explaining to Takeshi that all he is meant to do is open the door.
Okay. Now what? Open the door!
One of the enemy soldiers tries to stop him, but is killed by one of the knights. Takeshi then, nervously, slowly pushes the door open, unsure of what awaits him on the other side. Returning to the human world, we see the girl from earlier, presumably Takeshi's little sister, laying on the ground, her eye missing and something being poured onto her. Takeshi, again, powerless, looks on as the two home invaders pour gasoline, preparing to burn the house down with Takeshi and his family inside. One of the men seems to see something, calling the others' attention to it, asking what it is. They see a bright light as if a portal has been opened, and something is approaching from the other side. Suddenly, an army of reptilian monsters leap through and attack the two men. The lighter gets dropped and the house starts to burn, the reptilian men seemingly unaffected by the flames. They continue to attack the two men, one of them having their face ripped off and the other, oh my fucking god. Takeshi uses the last of his strength to smile as he watches the two men who killed his family being, literally, torn apart before closing his eyes and losing consciousness for the last time. In the other world, the wizard turns to Takeshi to thank him, explaining that he broke the seal and opened the door that leads to his world, setting all of those of the other world free. Finally, we cut to a news broadcast. The news anchor states that a crowd of reptile-like beings have suddenly appeared and are attacking humans, advising that everyone stays inside and locks their doors. We then get one last panel of a bunch of people being attacked with the warning, never give blind faith to what's been presented, whether it's sweet words or power fantasies. And I guess the world probably just ends or something with these reptile turtle things running around and killing absolutely everything they see. The end. Okay, so that was certainly something that I've read. So I don't think this story is bad per se, but I do have my issues with it, though I do want to start with what I do like. I will start with this. I like this manga conceptually. I think isekai that turns out to be a horror is a cool idea. Now, this is not the only manga to do it, but I like the idea enough that I will give credit for using this concept, even if it's not entirely original. But what I do really like is how it plays with the reincarnation trope in isekai. I like this idea of time dilation, where it seems that basically milliseconds in the human world can be literally days in the other world. And I love the idea that Takeshi was reincarnated, but he hasn't fully died yet, so he keeps jumping back and forth between worlds as he's fading in and out of consciousness. Also, Takeshi's kind of a fucking idiot, and I find that really funny. I also like when they get to the top of this hill. I made a joke about not knowing what happens in war earlier, but the reality is many people have this idea in their head about being a badass war hero, but have no idea just how horrifying it is once you actually get into it. And so I like them dragging Takeshi up to the top of the hill, and then once he sees all of the gore and corpses and death, he suddenly has this visceral reaction to it all. The art. I'm going to put this as the pivot point between talking about the good stuff and bad stuff because I'm a little back and forth on it. Let me be clear. The art is not bad at any point in this comic. Uguisu is a professional mangaka. Obviously, the art is going to be fine. My issue is that I find the art, while Takeshi is in the other world, to be incredibly generic looking. This just looks like any other isekai manga or light novel you might see. To me, at least, that's how it looks. That said, I think the art while in the house with the family is great. It's a bit more stylistic, and I think that comes from the fact that while we're in the house with the family, Uguisu is now drawing what he knows. He's not a fantasy mangaka, he's a horror mangaka. So when he's drawing the violent and traumatic parts, he seems to get more style into it versus just having to put something that passes as high fantasy on the page in order to serve the isekai theme of the story. What I've learned through my journey of reading as many of his manga as I can find translated in English is that Uguisu's art is very anime-y, if that makes sense. There's nothing specific about it that really makes it stick out as his. There are some mangaka that you can clock a piece of art by them instantaneously just by looking at it, but Uguisu doesn't really have that one. Again, his art isn't bad, it's perfectly fine. It looks good actually. Its biggest problem is just that in many cases it looks like many other manga. And I think this story brings this forth the most because Uguisu really shines when drawing horror, but having to draw generic fantasy for this story showed that more generic side of his art. I think a good way to summarize what I'm trying to say is this panel right here. Remove the context from your mind. Just from this art alone, what do you think this girl is crying about? See, I can't draw for shit, but what I've noticed from reading a lot of comics and manga is that it seems to be very difficult to draw a character crying. Whenever someone cries, it could be because they are feeling any number of different emotions. It can be because they're stressed, it could be grief, it could be terror and fear, it could be anger or tears of joy. I've noticed that not every artist can always nail the exact emotion that the character is feeling while they are crying. There is also sometimes a struggle to make it not look ridiculous. One of my favorite manga covers is the cover art for Volume 2 of Takopi's Original Sin, and it's because Taizan 5 did an amazing job showing the genuine sadness of a child crying in his art. And while the art for Volume 1 also looks good, it kinda looks like she's trying not to laugh. So back to this panel. What would you think she's crying about? Does this art show terror? To me, it looks like a child who tripped and fell and is now running for their mom. However, that is only in isolation. When zoomed out and given the proper context, the panel does just fine, showing us exactly what Uguisu wanted us to see. And I think that pretty much sums up my point here. Uguisu's art is not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it just doesn't very often excel far beyond serviceable. As far as specific parts I liked when it comes to the art, I really like this page where Takeshi steps onto the dead body and sees the aftermath of the battle. I also really like the page after it of his reaction. I also think this panel of the sister's eye being stabbed with the sound effect of her scream works really well. This pulled out shot with the big letters show how loud and guttural her scream is. Anyway, time to stop bitching about parts I actually liked, and it's time to start bitching about things that I don't like. So I think Uguisu's biggest problem seems to be in his writing. It's not horrible, I do like this story, but even being only about 30 pages, it feels kind of long. A lot of the time spent in the other world feels very meandering, but it also feels like you can't really cut too much out of it. I think its biggest problem is that the whole point of From Another World is that it is a story built entirely around building up to a twist. Now, there is this saying in writing that if your whole story relies on the twist, then it's not a good story. I don't fully agree with that. I think a good twist can help a story, and twists are fun, especially if you don't see them coming from a billion miles away. But there has to be something else too along with it. Again, I think this story being high fantasy isekai brings out all of Uguisu's weaknesses. One thing I've noticed going through Uguisu's library of work is that he knows how to write a good ghost story. He shines when writing a supernatural tale of some unexplained entity. Also, I think the moral is kinda dumb, mostly just because it doesn't work super well in this story. Like, the MC didn't really have much of a choice, he just seemed to have been kinda dragged along everywhere and then told by this army of people to open the door, so it's not like he really went out of his way to just do anything they wanted because of what they gave him. I think there's a niche that Uguisu can slide into very well and really dominate. See, Uguisu's stories tend to have some pretty explicit gore, like I said before, but again, it's not excessive. It's not Shintaro Kago levels. It's not a Waiza? Is that something like the guy who made the shit ass fucking Junko? Oh my god, I forgot her name too. This is bad. I'm off script right now. I want to. The guy that made Mei-chan's Daily Life. You're not gonna find stuff like this, but it's still rather explicit stuff. Not everything does. Again, some of his stories have no gore, but for the most part, you can expect to see someone end up in multiple pieces. And I think this is a perfectly underserved niche. Many horror manga either has hardly any gore at all, or is just full-blown Yuroguro, and the material that Uguisu puts out perfectly slots in as the bridge between them. They are good tester stories to see if you can dive deeper into that section of horror manga without being fucking traumatized. It's like a family roller coaster. It's bigger than the kiddie coasters, but can give you a good sense if you even like roller coasters before immediately going to get your neck snapped on accelerator. It's just that I think Uguisu's stories only fall short because they tend to have the writing of Yuroguro without the excessive gore and sex that makes people flock to it. Many Yuroguro stories are fucking woeful and are little more than a framing device so that the artist can draw batshit violence and gore. And Uguisu's work tend to have Better writing than that, but again, nothing groundbreaking. Going back to his Goodreads pages, this is what I mean when I say it makes sense that it's full of 3s and 3.5s. But don't be decepted. I do like this story, and I do like Uguisu in almost everything that I've read from him. Almost. So that was From Another World, the first isekai thing in a while to actually catch my interest. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of From Another World? Do you like it? Do you think it's bad? Does the horror work for you? And if you disagree with what I've said about the story, please tell me why you liked any part I disliked or disliked any part I liked. I would love to have a discussion about this story. I do plan to cover more of Uguisu's stories, and many of them are significantly better than this. So look forward to it, and remember the 2 morals of this story. Always question everything, and never, under any circumstances, should you fuck a turtle.